Okay, so I've managed to get M15 centered up. I've got myself guiding here. Let's see. So I've got my ZWO ASI178mc planetary camera. It's not cooled. I'm using the ZWO ASI capture program. I've got my format here on 16-bit instead of 8. Get as much as I can out of it. Bin 1, full resolution. My histogram, you can see it's going off the peak some. That's because I've got these brighter stars overexposed and maybe a tiny bit in the center. When I zoom in on the fit, it doesn't look too bad, the fit files. And I'm settled in on a 60-second exposure, 300 gain. And as you can see, it's a warm night out. It's 30.5 Celsius for my sensor temperature. And the actual outdoor temperature is about 76 degrees. 30.5 I think was 87 Fahrenheit. So it's of course the camera's running a little warmer than the outdoor temperature. And in my guiding, for me, I'm pretty content with this. I've got it on 1 second exposure. And tonight I've got it on south only for my declination moves. Let's see, when I did I don't want to actually select it, the guiding assistant. Let me do that without losing my guiding. It said that my polar alignment was off by about 7 arc seconds, which that's straight through my polar scope. That's not terrible. I know you can get considerably better. I decided I'm going to give that a try. And it was drifting slightly north, so the south correction works pretty good. Usually I have it on auto, and I have bigger spikes where it'll overcorrect and kick it back and overcorrect again, fighting the backlash. This mount, the Celestron AVX, has a lot of backlash. When I told it to measure backlash, and like usual it failed. I have got it to succeed before, and it was like something ridiculous, like 11 or 12 seconds. Let's see here. We can look at one of my fit files. We'll zoom in a little bit. And all in all, yeah, that's a little bit blown in the middle. I've thought about using shorter exposures, but then I'm getting, each fit frame is about 12 megabytes, and that starts adding up if you're doing a whole bunch of them. Because of course this is full size, the full frame. If I was doing planetary, if I wanted to do this as a region of interest and make it a lot smaller, it'd be a lot better for that. But anyway, I'll keep going with this and hopefully end up with a nice picture. So obviously I would like to be able to guide this and use less gain. See here what I'm on, 300. I could possibly have gone down to 250 or something. I'm just kind of experimenting to see what I can pull off here, because let's see, with this number isn't quite accurate because my pixel size is actually 2.4, but this old software wouldn't let me enter that. It goes at 3. So it came up with 0.62 arc seconds, but since the pixels are smaller, it should be a little less than that actually. But anyway, if you're going to image it to that kind of image scale, really you want your peaks smaller than that. It'd be nice to have your overall at half of that or less, really even your peaks. If you could have your peaks at 15 or 6 or say 30, 0.3, and be guiding at 0.1, 0.15, I can't pull that off. So I'm just kind of, it's almost like planetary. If I was doing planetary with my Maxitov 180mm Mac in this camera, the image scale is like 0.18. And I've played around with trying to do deep sky targets on it just for fun. I managed to get a picture of M57, and I mean, I think I had it on full gain of 510 and like a 2-minute exposure, and of course the stars were just kind of wallered out, you know, they were drifting around. I thought, well, see if I can pull something off with this. Just something interesting. I think I can get a reasonably good image, and I could try doing another set of exposures, what I call stars only, you know, since I can use StarNet++. And of course the weird part about that is it's all stars, but I can't resolve all of them anyway. So I'll see what I get out of this and then go from there. Well, 1 hour into this, look at that, the sensor's cooled all the way down to 29.7, well now 29.8. I've got it warmed up, and I started off at 76 degrees and now it's down about 73.5. So it is cooling off slightly. It's supposed to get down into the upper 60s. The dew point is, I think it was around 67 or 68. According to the forecast chart that I looked at, it wasn't supposed to get 100% humidity. I'm not using any kind of dew heaters. It's been guiding along pretty nice. We got one big gnarly spike there. Might have been when I walked back in and out. I notice that happens sometimes when I'm walking around out here. Now I'm about an hour and 20 minutes into it, and it's guiding right along, and this stuff happened when I ran in the house for a little bit, so it is doing some of that whether I'm there or not. Let's see, temperature of the camera 29.5. It's kind of stabilized for a little bit. I was thinking maybe I should try to find some kind of little open cluster, or even just a group of stars that are pretty bright, and try some really short exposures just to see what I pick up. If I can pick up some of the fainter stuff, and be interesting to see what it does. This thing will come up here. I've used about a gigabyte worth of data. I was trying to get it to hover in there and show. But I used about 750 megabytes in an hour. I haven't done darks or flats yet. I don't know how much difference the flats will make on something like this. It won't hurt, that's for sure. You can see. You see how much it's drifted. Sure, it's moved some. Even with the guiding, I notice things move along a little bit. If your polar alignment's a little off, it's going to drift. So it's probably drifting some to the north. So a little information here on M15 from Carte du Ciel. This is what it shows. Magnitude 6.4, but surface brightness is magnitude 11. So quite a bit of difference there. Dimensions 12.3 minutes by 12.3. Figure the moon is about 30. M13 I think is 23. Stars magnitude 13. Part of Pegasus. See, declination's plus 12, so it's pretty high in the sky. Let's see. Yeah, it'd be almost 63 degrees at 1 a.m. when it crosses the meridian. I'll give you an idea where it's at if you don't already know. This, basically here I'm looking due south. What this red line is, this other silhouette here is my house. I took one of those 360 degree pictures to kind of add all the trees and stuff around to get an idea when something's hidden behind the trees or not. But get your great square Pegasus there, M31. So it's fairly high in the sky. Well, I decided when I came back and saw this big spike, I thought, well, I'm going to reduce my declination aggressiveness down to 40 to see if that helps prevent some of those overcorrections. It was on 50. And I've been away from this for a few minutes, so this business here happened while I wasn't standing next to it. I think this one here happened right as I walked up here. Let's see. It's about 12:30 a.m. I checked my little thermometer, and it's cooled off to, I remember, I think it was 72.5 about. And let's see what my sensor temperature is. It's dropped down to 29.0. So we'll type that in. So we know at least that the camera's not building up heat, getting hotter, since it's cooling off outside. So let's see, the temperature outdoors has dropped, what, 3.5 degrees, and the sensor dropped 1.5, but that's Celsius. This is Fahrenheit, that's Celsius, so that may be fairly consistent. This thing's found its way back to a little bit of sanity. See what my most recent picture is. Taking 115. I've also decided after this gets to the meridian here in about 25 minutes or so, I am going to check out NGC 457 over by Cassiopeia. It's an open cluster. I'm thinking they call it the Owl. It's pretty cool. It's similar in size to this, but it's something that I can do shorter exposures on. And in an eyepiece, it's really cool. It looks kind of like a bird in flight. It looks like it's got two eyeballs. If I remember right, one of them is yellow and the other's blue. And looky there, it's gone a little far anyway. Which I'm just sitting here, but I've got the chair kind of leaning forward a little and my feet are on the concrete pad, so I might be doing something to move it. There's no wind. It's a nice calm night. When I originally set up tonight, I was wanting to guide at about a half a second, which if I tweaked my focus over here a little bit, I might have been able to do it at a half second, but my signal to noise ratio was dropping below 10 when I was doing that. And then instead of being green, it gets into yellow. And it was still guiding, but I didn't want to have it cause any problems. I just decided to drop my deck aggression down to 20, and then I hit clear here to start over this graph just to see how it does. When it was shooting way down, unless it was because of me moving something, it should have been an overcorrection on the part of the stepping, whenever it's a guide correction. You notice every time you see this move, each thing, it doesn't mean that you actually made a correction. So anything you see over here, it's actually sending in a correction. And then here, this minimum move at 0.25 on deck, I believe that means 1/4 of a pixel error before it makes any kind of corrective move. Seems pretty happy. I'm new with this idea. I'm not sure about the RA when I could. It says RA's default is 70%, but I think over here the default's 100. But then, if I had it on 100 right now, I would definitely want it to be on auto, and then I would be overshooting and overshooting. So I'd read about people doing this, and I haven't tried it much, but I happened to notice somebody had theirs set up that way, and they had their deck aggression much lower. So here is the very first image I captured, and then I'll go to the last one that I captured, and we'll see how much it's drifted in about an hour. Actually, it started at 10:39. I guess it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes or so. And here is the most recent, so it has dropped down and it's moved a little bit. Well, I can say the declination really stabilized quite a bit for a few minutes there. I'm almost at the transit point. It may get a little funny there when the balance kind of changes, or I think it kind of floats a little. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting, you can tell it to go south only or north only with deck. Now, you can't do anything like that with your right ascension, and tell it to only make a correction to the east or west, at least that I know of. There's no button. And of course, you've got periodic error correction, so the worm gear is going to make it jump around. So it has to correct that. Well, according to Cartier du Ciel, I'll bring up this is the Connect Telescope menu. It shows my azimuth at 180. So it's saying that I just crossed over. And you notice my guiding. Of course, it had done this before, but it may be floating or something like that. I think it's time to move on to my next object. Now, one thing I've found that I like, I don't always do a meridian flip. A lot of people have theirs set up to automatically do it. Sometimes if I'm having a really good night with one object and I want to get more time on it, I'll manually do the flip, and I'm watching out for my cables. Sometimes I'll even stop all the guiding and everything and disconnect all my cables and reconnect when I get to the other side. And I would just, like I say, I would manually do it and have my light on to make sure I'm not getting anything twisted up. And my real reason for not trying to have a real organized cable control like some people do is I like to be able to switch telescopes and camera lenses and stuff at any given time. And the way they do it, they kind of have a permanent setup, which is really cool. Well, here's a quick peek at the very last image I took. I mean, it can't be perfectly tracking. They got to be kind of oblong, but it doesn't look like it got horrible. Probably because it'd been wandering all directions around. So I'd mentioned that a lot of times I avoid the meridian flip. So see here, my red line M15 is crossing from the east half over to the west. And what I've just discovered kind of by chance is sometimes when one object goes over to the side, I can look back to the east. I'm already set up over here and find another object. I've done that. The first time I remember doing it, I was doing Andromeda Galaxy M31. And when it crossed over, I was thinking about a meridian flip, and I just happened to look over to my east and saw that M45, the Pleiades, was coming up over the trees. I thought, hey, I don't have to switch camera lenses or anything, because they were the same reasonable field of view. At that time, I was using my Nikon D50 and the 300mm lens. So then I'll show you over here where NGC 457, and find it again. So there it is after a little search. And oops, zoom in on it. And I think I actually selected one of the stars in it. It's up here. It's magnitude 6.4. And, you don't have a surface brightness thing since it's just stars. It's 13 by 13 minutes in size. Just barely bigger than what I was just doing. That was 12 by 12. and it mentions this Phi Cassiopeia is not a member, so it's just a star that happens to be in the same field of view, but it's not an active part of the same cluster or group of stars. So it's just got above the trees, and it doesn't culminate till 4:50 a.m. about. And the moon came up about an hour ago too, so this will be nice. I don't have to worry about long exposures or anything in the moonlight giving me any issues. One thing I didn't mention was when I'm using this longer focal length, I haven't been using the plate solving with the camera in this smaller focal length, because with my old slower computer it takes considerably longer to actually plate solve the file. So instead of taking a minute, it might take 10 minutes or 15, so I've been doing it with an eyepiece. What I normally do then, right now I'm taking some dark frames. I'll get a couple of those in. So what normally I'll do is I'll get pointed approximately there, and I'll find it in a wide field eyepiece. Like in this case, I've got that 27mm Angel Eisman, and that's got a nice wide field for this telescope. And I'll get it pretty well centered in that, and then I've got a 12.5mm eyepiece with a crosshair. I'll try to center it in that, and then I can also center it here in the ZWO software with its crosshair tool if I want to really get it centered. And sometimes when I do that, if it's a known star, I'll get on either just get on here and select the star and tell it to sync it in Carte du Ciel, or I can also go into CPWI and select a specific star if I know I'm pointed at it, and instead of saying go to, I'll tell it to add it to the model. But my pointing model that I made was all kind of in the southern half of the sky, since that's where my object was. So I'm a little bit off. I went over to where I should be close to it, and I don't think I'm quite there. So I thought, well, I need to take my darks. I really didn't want to pull the camera out, but I'll look at it and try to keep it in the same rotation. So here is a dark frame at 60 seconds. The sensor temperature up around 29 degrees Celsius. There's no big obvious amp glow right yet. It's there if I go stretching enough. Well, that was relatively painless. I did the eyepiece thing. Of course, it's not very good for flat files, because I might not be able, there's no way I can get the camera in the exact same spot. But I don't think I'll have an issue with what I'm doing here. So I was double checking. Alpha Cassiopeia should be the star Shetter. There it is, Shetter. I'm going to go over here to CPWI, and I've already selected Shetter. And instead of clicking Go To, I'm going to click Add to Model. And the reason that's flashing is because it's close to the edge of the screen. Let me see if I can move this up. There. It's kind of quit doing that to me. There, it's settled down. So I'll click Add to Model. And we'll move that out of the way for a second. And then it'll say make sure it's centered. And I've already centered it, so I'll just click Centered. And it added it to all my pointing model. So I started off with stars in the south. I did Altair. And I don't even remember what the others were. I think one of them was Enif. And another one was some HR number. And on here, it doesn't tell you the name of the star like it did up here. It just gives you the R-Rag and deck. It tells me what it believes my error is. So anyway, now I will go ahead and put my camera back in, and I ended up having to change my focus to get it into the crosshairs, so I'll refocus and use that crosshair focus mask that I 3D printed for that telescope, the AR102. So while I was doing that, I turned off the camera, so we'll reconnect there. And you can see it automatically by default comes up to RAW 8, RAW 16 to get 16-bit instead of 8-bit. And I don't need a 60-second exposure to focus. So there's shutter. I'll turn on my crosshair. So you can see I can fine-tune my position a little more. I need to bring my slewing control back up. And take it down to a real small move there of some sort. What it takes to. I could go ahead, the shorter the exposure you have on here, the faster it reacts, obviously, so we'll get her down. Okay, just go ahead and jack her up to full gain, and we'll get it down. Let's see, 100 would be 1/10 of a second. Don't have to be exact. That way it looks a lot more fluid. And put that on a little more. There we go. Had it a little too slow. Of course, I don't have it zoomed in either. That's another cool thing here. So I had it at like 29%, 27%. You can zoom way in when you center it. So if I want, I could add that to my point model again, or I could go over here to Carte du Ciel, and if it's still on there. I could find shutter here. Center this. There it is. It should be at alpha cast. Go down here. Drop down. Instead of slew, I'll go sync alpha cast. It says make sure alpha Cassiopeia, which is shutter, is centered, and I'll just click yes. Now that's in agreement. And then I'll go grab my little focusing mask and fine tune this. Matter of fact, before I do that, I'll tweak it a little bit real quick in here. Going the wrong way. Turn that off. It's a little distraction. You might notice there's another star with it right there. So when I do get that in there, I should have both stars, but I'll go grab my mask real quick and do that. Okay, I've got that focus mask on there. We're not seeing any spikes yet. I may need to increase my exposure time a little. There, it's starting to show up. I'm moving it slightly inwards. See, I'm starting to get spikes, but we'll take it up to from about 1/8 of a second to up to 1/4 of a second, 250 milliseconds about, give or take, right? And they're showing up better. What you notice too, I'll go ahead and throw it out a little bit here to try to get the spikes to double. Well, they disappeared. I went too far. And let it settle down a little. If I jack it up to a full second, there the spikes show up a little better that way. I'm just trying to get it to where they'll actually start to separate when I go out of focus. They are. Let me take it up to 2 seconds. And let's go to 4 seconds even. There you can start to see the spike there is separating. And of course now when I make an adjustment I gotta get 4 seconds for it to correct before it refreshes itself. That's one reason it's nice to do the much shorter, but we'll take it down to 1. And we can try to get it to sharpen, so you can peek it there. That's why I usually use the less than a second. I like it better at about a 1/4 of a second or less, just because it refreshes quicker. Of course, this is at f10 too. I used to always do this at in a Newtonian at about f5. Plus, I had an electric focuser on that one, so I could really tweak it. But I can get this fine-tuned, and you can watch for stars to pop in and out, the fainter ones. Okay, so I've got that in there pretty good, and I've got this on 4 seconds just to try to make the spikes really show up good. Drop her down 3. But anyway, now I should be in good focus. And of course I just want to remember to take off my mask. I'll take that off too real quick and look at the difference. So there shows my focus pretty good. Kind of zoom back out a little. That's at 1 second. And then I can go find my object, which is close by, that owl cluster, and find an exposure for it and get it guiding and see what I can do. So now I'll tell it to go from there. Just when I wanted it to do it. Find it again. I just had it. So let's slew over the 457. I'm right by it. It's just being on-ran, wanting to pick individual stars, some of which were in there. Here we are back on camera. And I'm quite certain we're there. I think those are the eyeballs on it. Got the exposure to a second or so here. And I'll see if I can get it centered up here in a sec. So those two bright stars there are the eyes, and then the wings and the body are right along there. I can hold the microphone and do this at the same time. Bring up the exposure a little bit just to make sure I'm looking at the whole thing. It's going to blow those out, but yeah, there we're starting to get it, and then there's some noise in there too, but I want those stars to yellow, the blue one and the yellow, and the body and the wings. So I'll kind of play with the position a little bit, and I've got most of that in there. And I want to try to have a nice short exposure. I'll end up with a lot of frames, a lot of data, and then try to bring this out. I want to try to have color in all my stars and have all my stars nice and sharp. Now that I'm pointed to a different area of the sky, I'm in the northeast instead of the southeast, it started reacting differently. This part here where it goes way off isn't always that unusual. It has to correct itself once I start. But I noticed it wasn't wanting to bring the deck down here to this center line. I jacked my aggression all the way back up to 100, and it's still on south only. It hasn't crossed it yet. So it may be settled down about to where it's going to be. I'll have to keep an eye on it. And right now I'm trying a 20-second exposure at 99 gain. I haven't started capturing any. The brightest star here might be kind of saturated. But if I get plenty of frames, I should be okay. After a few minutes of experimenting, I decided to go back to 60 seconds, and I just reduced my gain from 300 down to around 99, approximately 100. And I wanted to make sure I was actually picking up these stars in each image. And my guiding seems to have calmed down. It says I'm down to less than 1 arc second for the minute overall. My peaks are right about 2. Now, it may not stay that way the whole time. I know sometimes I start off and it'll be real good, and then it starts wandering around, and then it settles again later sometimes, but hopefully you'll get something decent out of that. Here is my first exposure, just as a fit frame, where it just does a quick process. So it makes it easier there to see the shape of the eyes and the body and kind of the tail and wings. Seems to be big enough that it's hard to get all of it in there. It's a little bigger than what the chart showed that it might be. It's quite alright. As you can see, my guiding started doing some overcorrecting here. So I just reduced my aggression down to 90 a few seconds ago. See if we can settle that down some. Well, the temperatures dropped down to 69.6 degrees. Sensors dropped to 28.2, so it went from think it was 76.1, so it's dropped about 6.5 degrees in 4 hours. Today the high was 90, maybe 92 or 3 even. And I thought the low tonight was supposed to be in the upper 60s. Maybe it'll be a little cooler out here in the country. Dropped my aggression even more down to 80. I may have to drop it considerably. Maybe it was just taking quite a while to catch up. You know, when I had it way down low, it may have taken several minutes. I dropped it all the way down to 60 on aggression, and as soon as I speak, it gets a big spike. But I noticed as I went, some of these weren't quite as crazy and wide. So let's keep an eye on it and see what it does. Well, now the aggression is all the way down to 50. And it seems to have smoothed out quite a bit. Well, Cassiopeia is a really good area to look for all kinds of clusters, and of course there's where I'm at with NGC 457. Let's see. M76, the cork or mini dumbbells close by. Down here, if I get to zoom out, these two right here, I believe that's the Heart and the Soul Nebula. So you got the two separate ones, and some people will image them together. I've tried to take pictures of them with my full spectrum camera before I got the hydrogen alpha stuff. I'm going to try those again. I think I can get them. The double cluster and Perseus is right there. That's real nice. So this area is real good for binoculars or an eyepiece or just find a nebula. Let's see, the Pac-Man Nebula is in here. NGC 281. That's not it. Obviously, that's what I'm looking at. I'll find it here real quick. Okay, so NGC 281 is not far from 457. It's up quite close to Shedder. And this is one too where sometimes the chart information's weird. Maybe it's because there's more than one nebula in there. Because, as a matter of fact, it says cluster and nebula because the Pac-Man itself is not 4 minutes by 4 minutes. That'd be similar in size to M57, the Ring Nebula, maybe very small. When in fact, this thing is more like the size of the moon. So it'd be more like 30 by 30. Takes up quite a bit of space. The Bubble Nebula is also quite nearby, right up here, which is very close to M52, which is a little open cluster. So we've got the Bubble again. It's NGC 7635. Got all these different wonderful catalog numbers. I think that's Large Bright Nebula. Catalog 549. Let's see, yeah, Bubble Nebula. There's probably numerous different names for them. And this is another one that's got a lot of hydrogen alpha in it. It's really cool looking if you can get a good picture of it. If you go a little farther up here, kind of towards Deneb and the North American Nebula and all that, up here in Cepheus or Cepheus. This area here, I believe it's one of the names is IC 1396. There's so many names. or little clusters, but this is where the Elephant Trunk Nebula is, in this area here. I tried to take pictures of it full spectrum and didn't have good luck at all, but it is really a cool area. So I'm going to try that again with my hydrogen alpha filter too. I would plan to do this with the 200mm lens. This is a pretty big area. Well, I'm not sure yet what just happened. Both of these just went wild on me. I may have a cable snag or something. So I stopped guiding and I'm stopping the imaging for a minute, and I'll see if I can solve it or not. Well, I may have found one potential issue. I just noticed that there's a bunch of clouds that are mostly kind of thin, some of them fairly thick, moving in across part of the sky. Most of the sky looked clear, but I suppose it's possible that some of that junk was drifting in front of my star and messing with it. It really doesn't look that bad here. The moon's not too far from it, but it wasn't bothering me before. So anyway, not a total loss. Well, by the time I got my toys put up, clouds were really taking over, so I think that's what the whole problem was. I just had a cloud that I wasn't expecting, and I probably just lost my guide star, and that's why RA and Deck went nuts on me, because there wasn't anything else going on, and the clouds were. So we'll get something going here with both of these. And I took darks for each one. And then I took flats. That'll work for both of those. I'm going to change that over to FITS files. I take my flats with my computer monitor, so I end up taking them after I've got the scope off the mount. So that's convenient and inconvenient all in one, I guess. Saves a few pennies. For fun, we can go to this here. Should be plenty of stars with 60-second exposure at gain 300. It's one thing about Deep Sky Stacker, if you don't give a long exposure so that you can have a lot of stars. Let's see, I used some of this stuff I did different the last time I was having an issue. The recommended settings are, it says I should apply that. And 44 lights. Use one or the other. I'll click one and it says happy. Make it happy. Say okay. I got 2 hours and 24 minutes on M15. So we'll let it play with its thing and see what we get. Realized I forgot to add offset bias. It's already processing. I clicked stop, but it ignored me. So maybe I'll process it twice. We'll see how it looks. There you can see how far it drifted in pixels, I believe is what that is, over the evening. Over the course of, what, 2 hours and 24 minutes or something. Well, this is what I've got so far. I'll get something really cool looking when I get it all processed out. And I think I'll add those bias frames to it and run it through one more time too, so I can find them. Nope, I don't have any that don't have that have that amount of gain. We'll see. If I need them, I'll use them later. So here's with no stretch, and I can already see it's a little burnt in there in the center. And I don't know if all these red spots are into something that would deal with the bias. I could probably get rid of them. We'll give it a quick little stretch just to look at it. And there's certainly something to work with. And I can clean up the background and everything. I'll have to play with it. Now we'll see what we get out of the old owl. Using the same flat frames. Hopefully the rotation is close enough. And oh yeah, I can't put bias in it because I don't have any with that gain setting. So we'll go check all, register. I can check this too here. There should be a zillion stars in there, I hope. Okay, hopefully that's enough. If not, I'll have to play Registacks or something. And there it says no offset, 41 minutes worth. So we'll see what comes out of that. Well, let's see. I thought it was done. It's almost there. Well, I can say it looks like a bird in flight. We'll save the picture to the right place. See what we get. So there it is in GIMP with no stretch. We'll give it a quick stretch here to well, there's lots of stars anyway. If I play with it, I can get it to look like something. I'll see what I can do with this here. And of course, I guess the part that one of the things that annoys me most is all these red dots, which, well, that's what happens when you crank up the gain and it's hot out. But you know, and then I think it was a 60-second exposure. But I'm going to stretch it some, and I'm going to run it through StarNet++, because I've heard that you can do interesting things there. And I'll see what happens too. If maybe I may just be able to blast those out, but I think if I just select them until it's subtracted, it'll change the color. I'll find a way to get rid of them one way or another and see what happens. One of the reasons I mentioned StarNet++, I just recently saw a video. I think the channel's Deep Space Astro, and this guy, he's figured out a way to use multiple programs to bring out a whole lot more stars, in particular in the core of a globular cluster, and it's pretty cool. So I'm going to play with that idea. I don't have all the software he has, but anyway, I'll see what I can do with this. So I'll just give it enough of a stretch here to bring out the stars, and then I'm going to run it through StarNet just for fun. I guess the idea is it'll end up looking like a halo here. And then I'm not sure how to save the star mask on StarNet++. I'll see if I can figure that out. If I can do that, the idea is you'll have all the stars and get rid of that glow around it. Let's see. I don't want to get real particular, but I can clean up the background stuff later. This will really be a different thing, but I'll see what I can come up with. So I'll export one here. And this one here that I'm exporting is just for StarNet itself. Okay. Well, I see that those red dots are in this one too on the owl, even though the gain was quite a bit lower, but say the temperature of the sensor was around plus 30. So this one here will be a little more straightforward. I'll just see what I can do here and give it some stretch to get stuff to show, and maybe play with the saturation to see what I can do with the colors. And I may have to blast out those darn red dots one at a time. There should be a way, but right at the minute, I'm not sure. It would have been nice if the dark frames had got rid of those, but no go. It's not difficult to get a lot of stars out. I probably shouldn't try stretching this too awful much. I'll bring the black in here some. I'm going to play with it and see what I can do. Play with the curve a little here. Kind of brighten those up some, and then drag the black up a little. Try to darken that background some. And then I can go here to the exposure one and bring up the black level a notch at a time. And just kind of watch to, each time I bring it up, give it a second to refresh there and see if it's actually losing anything or not. I think that looks kind of neat. I know some people don't like this halo around here, but I kind of like that if it, at least if it's the same color as the star. That'll be something to experiment with sometime. But it adds a little color to those stars that are burned out. One more here. I know this area appears a little brighter because that's where the amp glow is. The background's a little brighter, but it's not terrible. Sometimes a little processing's better than a lot. See what happens if we do something with saturation, just as I'm playing around here. I'm just going to grab the scale here and drag it up and bring a little more color into everything. The only really thing that bugs me about the halo color around here is I know one of these stars is actually yellow. So it wouldn't have a blue or purple halo. That's just achromatic refractor. I guess it's possible to find the right one here to kind of reduce the saturation of a color, but it probably well, at least that makes that, in a way, that makes that look a little more natural. Because before, if I cancel what I did there, the blue color kind of looks neat till I realize, like I say, that one star is not supposed to be that color. I guess you can also change the hue of it, but I'm not sure which. Don't want to go that way or that way. So I think the saturation is a darker blue, something close to violet. Drag it a little and wait a second for the thing to refresh. And try to maybe if I just get the purple color out of there, kinda. Guess that's closer to a natural color for that star. And it didn't seem to really. I'll hit reset just to see what it did to the others. Yeah, and I say the color didn't change that much on these others. Most of the color is actually the halo, which might be the fringe from being achromatic. And all those little red dots, they're there, but they're not as annoying right at the minute. I could go through and touch them up with an airbrush and just put little black spots there to try to match the sky background. That other one, M15's got so many, it's like not worth spending hours. At least not to me. But a couple minutes isn't too bad. Let's just get an idea here. Use my color picker. Click a similar background color. I don't know if that did that. Yeah, I think it's. I'll go backwards. I don't know why, but see, it didn't change the colors. So if I go foreground, background, now it changes these, and I do both of them. And then it seems like it actually changes the airbrush color. And I don't know how, oh well, the opacity's way down. See, I was playing with something else earlier. I didn't have it on 100% opacity. Okay. And I can play with the size of it here. There's a few of them, and some of the places I'll need to reselect my color because not everywhere is the background sky color going to be the same, and I'll end up with black dots instead of red dots. Anyway, that's an idea of what we can do with it. So on most of this, I was able to not even do anything. But here I'm starting to see black dots, so I'm going to go ahead and Command Z that out. And I'll just select this color up in here, which is a little more of a funky green instead of a black. If you're trying to do this in something that's got a lot of nebula or galaxy or something, sometimes it seems like you have to reselect for almost every dot. And if you got a big imperfection, you might find yourself selecting here and here and here and here, and then you got to decide how patient you are. So now it's darker. I don't know if it's gonna, it doesn't seem to show. I've got most of it actually done. It only took 3 or 4 minutes, if that. Like I say, I think that other one, the globular cluster, having 300 gain instead of like 99 or 100. That one there could be kind of a do-over on the whole thing. Sometime I'll try it again and see how I like it with less gain, and see what I can do with it. So we'll save out a, let's go ahead and hit save here and make an XCF file, just a GIMP file, and I'll export a PNG, I guess. Find export on there. There it is. Export as. And this part takes quite a bit longer since I'm changing formats, so we'll pause on that. Okay, and then I'll StarNet should be finishing up that other file. I was doing it on a different computer, so I'll take a look at it next and see if I got anything to work with, or if I'm just gonna do it kind of like what I did with this, which there isn't much I can do with a globular, I don't think. Well, here is what you get when you run a globular clusters through StarNet++. Actually kind of looks funny. I think it's kind of, when you add the stars to it, it looks screwy. I played around with it a little bit. The guy that Deep Space Astro channel that does it, he does stuff with Cyril, which I haven't learned yet, but I'm going to watch his videos, and if you're interested in that stuff, definitely check out what he's doing and maybe figure it all out. I did notice one thing just a minute ago. I was looking, all these red dots. If I select my red here in the hue saturation and just drag this down, they just kind of become at least neutral color, and it doesn't seem to, I'll hit reset, it didn't seem to really affect this area that much when I did that. So I'm not sure. I'll have to try it with the star one here. Let me bring it back up. Yeah. I'll bring it up to a bigger size here where you can see it. And you can see the red dots like crazy. Go colors, hue saturation. I just dragged it all the way down. And they kind of disappear. I'll hit reset and see if it changes the looks of this. It didn't seem to. So reset. So that's a quick way to at least make them less obvious. And at least as far as my processing ability, I mean, I can clean up this background and stuff playing around with it. I could probably do something with a mask. Let me see what I can play with there. Let's layer duplicate. And I'm gonna make a mask here, a high contrast one. So go down on layer to mask, add layer mask, and I've learned that you want to have it set on grayscale copy of layer and invert, and it's going to make a mask that ends up protecting everything that you want, hopefully. So here's what we got to begin with. It just put that little white box, and you want to make sure you've got this up here selected, and I think I even want to click that. And I'll go layer again, down to mask, and we don't want to apply yet. You do that after you play with it. And we're going to select show layer mask, and it's going to turn everything white. And then we go colors, curves. At least this is the way I figured out what to do. And I'm going to drag this down the opposite way instead of, and it'll gradually let it do its thing there. So the idea is I'm protecting everything that's black, and then the other stuff I'll be able to get rid of, hopefully. It's going to be a little bit of a trick. I did learn that when I can use my, see, one click makes a big difference when you get this far, because I got to drag it way over here to the lower right, and if I go all the way, it just bounces back out on me. That's a bit much. So there's that. Then, yeah, it looks like it's protecting a bigger area of the ball of the cluster there in the middle. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and go back up that click. I'll click OK. And you can see the amp glow in here is what's showing there. It's got streaks coming down and stuff. And I'm going to go to contrast. Brightness contrast. Let's see if we can crank up the contrast of this. And maybe wiping out some of what I did here. I'm not sure. It's kind of a the way I'm doing it. I've got so much noise and junk in here that it's hard to do a lot. Matter of fact, it's hard to clean up all that crap with the going in between the stars. So I'm probably not going to get much anywhere with that, but I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and do that again just for I don't have to save this. I could crop it out, but I try not to. I try to keep full frame. Click OK. And then after you make it, go back to layer mask again, and that's when you hit apply. And so see, there's the mask it made. And this one here, I don't see that much of a difference. I didn't make it high enough contrast, but it should really. This here should be a lot darker. Anywho, let me play with it for a second. Well, this is interesting. What I did was use my color select tool and just selected a couple areas here in the gray to try to match up with this background. Then went over to airbrush, and I just kept testing, and I went down, I lowered my opacity from 100 all the way down to, what, 34.9. And now it's almost the same. It's not quite, and it's interesting to play with for a second. If I keep going over too much, I'm probably getting it too dark. I'll turn this back on. And I can see the mask's doing a little bit. If you look at the upper right hand corner, the amp glow comes back. Turn the mask back on. It darkens that up a little. So it is something that you can play with a little bit. It's kind of quick and dirty. So I guess I'll have to find a way to get Cyril onto one of my computers. It needs, this is a 32-bit computer I'm playing with right here. It needs to be on 64-bit and have at least 8 gigabytes of RAM and like Windows 8.1 and above, and it also works with Linux and I think some of the Apple stuff. So I may be able to play around with something and get it on one of my computers, and then I'll have to learn how to use it. Try to darken this a little more on this mask. It kind of darkens that background down there a little. So I'm going to go ahead and merge that mask down, or the layer down, which is the mask. So that dropped down into one. And go to this exposure thing again. Maybe I can barely darken up the background. It's just a matter of seeing how much detail I lose around the cluster. Really didn't seem to hurt it. What's one more click do? Try to see what that did. It's not too bad. And I can play with that area or crop it out. But all in all, considering what I started with all those red nasty dots all over the place, those are gone. They're still, I think they're still there. They're just dark gray. They just don't jump out so obvious. So anyway, it is possible to go out with a planetary camera, and especially just depending on what target you grab, doing that, when it's so hot. If I do it when it's cool out, I don't have near the noise problem, and that's probably the hottest weather I tried it. It was clear out, and I thought I'm going to give it a go and see what it does. And I guess I could go, I just noticed this blue glow around here. Go back up to hue saturation, select that blue. It kind of turns that into a whitish color. I think if you get a fringe killer filter, one of those kind of purplish ones, it gets rid of that, and I think it gets rid of the glow around it, because that's what it is it's not as sharp at focus way down deep in the blue part near ultraviolet. Or you can buy an achromatic telescope for a whole lot more money.